Chapter 10. The men finishing their meeting, they all stood and walked past Naya's house. Naya joined the crowd of children following them. A few minutes' walk beyond her house there was a tree, and the men stopped at the tree, and the strangers talked to Naya's uncle some more. There was another tree some 50 paces past the first, and with Naya's uncle beside him, one of the men stopped at the halfway point. The other man walked the rest of the way and examined the second tree. The first man called out to his friend in a language Naya did not understand. The friend answered in the same language, but as he walked back towards the group, he translated for the chief, and Naya could hear him. "This is the spot, halfway between the two largest trees. We will find water here." Naya shook her head. What were they talking about? She knew the place like the back of her hand. It was there between the two trees that the village sometimes gathered to sing and talk around a big fire. There wasn't a single drop of water there unless it rained. Southern Sudan, 1985. Selva reached for his gourd and knew it would be half full, but suddenly felt much lighter, as if there was hardly any water left in it at all. Uncle Jewar must have guessed what he was thinking. "No, Selva, you're too small and not strong enough yet. Without water, you will not survive the rest of the walk. Some of the others, they will be able to manage better than you." Sure enough, there were now 3 women giving water to the men on the ground. Like a miracle, the small amounts of water revived them. They were able to stagger to their feet and join the group as the walking continued. But their 5 dead companions were left behind. There were no tools in which to dig, and besides, burying the dead would have taken too much time. Selva tried not to look as he walked past the bodies, but his eyes were drawn in their direction. He knew what would happen. Unfortunately, animals would find the bodies and eat them. Oh, what a horrible way to go. If he were older and stronger, he would have given water to those men, or would he, like most of the group, kept water for himself? It was the group's 3rd day in the desert. By sunset, they would be out of the desert, and after that, they would be far to the Itang refuge in camp in Ethiopia. As they trudged through the heat, Selva finally had a chance to talk to Uncle about a worry that had been growing like a long shadow across his thoughts. "Uncle, if I am in Ethiopia, how will my parents ever find me? When will I be able to go back to Loun Eric?" "I have talked to the others," Uncle said. "We believe that the village of Loun Eric was attacked and probably burned. Your family—" Uncle paused and looked away, and when he looked back again, his face was solemn. "Selva, a few people in the village survived the attack. Anyone still alive would have fled into the bush, and no one knows where they are now." Selva was silent for a moment, then said, "At least you will be there with me in Ethiopia." Uncle's voice was gentle. "No, Selva, I'm going to take you to the refugee camp, but then I will return to Sudan to fight the war." Selva stopped walking and clutched at Uncle's arm. "But, Uncle, I will have no one. Who will be my family?" Uncle gently loosened Selva's grip so he could take the boy's hand. "There will be many other people in the camp. You will become friends with some of them and make a kind of family there. They, too, will need people so that they can depend on." Selva shook his head, unable to imagine what life would be like in a camp without Uncle. He squeezed Uncle's hand tightly. Uncle stood quietly and said nothing more. "He knows it will be hard for me," Selva said. "He does not want to leave me there, but has to go back to fight for our people. I can't act like a baby. I must try to be strong." Selva swallowed. "Uncle, when you get back to Sudan, you might meet my parents somewhere. You could tell them where I am, or you could talk to those you meet and ask where the people of Loun Eric are now." Uncle did not answer, then said, "Of course, I will do that, nephew." Selva felt a tiny spark of hope. With that Uncle looking for his family, there was a chance they might all be together one day. No one in the group had eaten much for 2 days. Their water was nearly gone, and only the vision of leaving the desert kept moving through the heat and dust. Early that afternoon they came across the first evidence the desert was receding. A few stunted trees near a shallow pool of muddy water. The water was unfit to drink, but a dead stork lay by the pond's edge, and immediately the group began to make preparations to cook and eat the bird. Selva helped gather twigs for the fire. As the bird roasted, Selva could hardly keep his eyes off it. There would only be enough for a bite or two for each person, but he could hardly wait. Then, as he heard loud voices, along with the rest of the group, he turned and saw 6 men coming towards them. As the men approached, they could see they were armed with guns and machetes, and the men began shouting, "Sit down! Hands on your heads! All of you, now!" Everyone in the group sat down at once, and Selva was afraid of these weapons, and he could see that the others were too. One of the men walked among the group and stopped in front of Uncle. Selva could tell by the ritual scarring on the man's face that he was from the Nuer tribe. "Are you with the rebels?" "No," Uncle said. "Where have you come from? Where are you going?" "We've come from the West Nile. We're going to Itang, to the refugee camp." The man told Uncle to get up and leave his gun where he was. 2 of the men took Uncle to his tree several yards away and tied him up. Then the man moved among the group. If anyone was carrying a bag, the men opened it and took whatever was in it. They ordered some people to remove their clothing and took that too. Selva was trembling. Even in the midst of fear, he realized that for the first time on the trip, it was a good thing to be the youngest and smallest. When he went to his uncle, maybe they will leave us alone now. I've robbed us, Salva thought. Then they heard him laughing. As Salva watched, one of the men aimed his gun at Uncle. 3 shots rang out, and the man went away.